Hello. I believe I'm streaming. Wow. Though I shot, only got about 4 minutes of it. I was talking for close to an hour. I hope this is streaming right now. I'm going to sit here and wait and watch for video to pop up here. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. All right, I'm going to just summarize. First, there are no left-right screen transitions. It's gone. So that thing that worked so well in Windows 10 and was such a big step forward user interface wise. See that? Can you see that? The way it switches left and right? Ooh, smooth, smooth. And that kind of thing is usability. That's usability. If I were to turn Karnak on here so that you can see my key presses, you can see me going left and right. Only just pops it open so you can see the screen that's there. It doesn't do a smooth screen transition. So if you have a few empty screens, let me throw a few more at the end. Oh, it doesn't make it quite as easy to add new verts. You pick them up and move them. Oh, that's big. That's new. But it does seem like there's... So I'll get rid of this Explorer window here so you can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll even get rid of this one here. That's my notes. Well, those are good notes. I'll keep those displaying, but I'll move them over here. And so now we've got 5 desktops. And when I go left and right, if I don't reach at, here at the beginning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, back, you can tell there's just no way to tell. You're switching between virtual desktops. It's completely unknowable, but Karnak key display thing. So I went into settings to see if there was a way to change that. This might have been what caused streaming to stop, switches being off and on. In fact, I'm sure that's what caused streaming to stop. I couldn't find it before. It used to be under display, system display, but I looked through display and there was nothing there that talks about Windows animations. But under accessibility, there is right here, visual effects. And I was hoping, oh, animation effects is off. Dare I turn it on? I turn it on. I'll check the streaming. Check how sure I was of all that. Hey, look, that still says it's streaming. Does YouTube still say it's streaming? Yeah, YouTube still seems to be streaming me. I even have an audience there. Oh, wow. Okay, I finally got here while you're still online. Yeah, hi there. Celtic Orthodox Prayer. Love chatting with you. Yeah, you're right. $800 is a little bit expensive. $200 is cheaper. But the Microsoft hardware, particularly these Surface laptops, are worth it. As much as I put Microsoft down. Good. Okay, you type. I'm going to keep doing my thing, but I'm going to check with you for your comments. I'm very excited. So that setting that I just showed you under settings does not turn on the screen transition effect that I want and need. So I've been misled. TShirt Reveal, right? So yesterday it was a TIE fighter and Millennium Falcon and X-Wing fighter because I was in a fighter jet mood, installing stuff. It was new hardware. Now I feel misled. So that's no moon. A lot of things going on there. I don't know if the reference carries over to whatever country you're from. There, my Celtic prayer friend, but I'm feeling misled. My whole reason to try Windows 11 kind of dissolved away. So as a consolation prize, I'm checking the graphics out. And you can actually see I have a few of them loaded here. The two things I tried was Nautilus, the file manager, and the X11 apps, which is the googly eyes, the calculator, the things people traditionally try under X Windows. I might still have some of them running, but if I don't, they're easy enough to bring up. Minimize my notes. There's Xcalc. Right? I couldn't get the googly eyes working, but if I close out of the calculator, I'll try the googly eyes again. Oh, yay, there's the googly eyes, right? Maybe this was the reason why my last streaming failed, because this is what makes my videos popular. So, yeah, X-Eyes with transparency nonetheless. This is Microsoft's implementation of that thing. Yeah, I'm testing, ArrowSnap and stuff. ArrowSnap seems to be a missing thing. Now, Windows Tab, in order to drop that onto different windows, that's nice. That's working, pretty important. Maybe I'll keep this nice and big for a bit so that YouTube chooses it as a screen snapshot, and then I'll get lots of views, apparently. That's how it works. So it locks up the terminal, right? If I were to go back, you'll see I can't do anything else with that terminal. And in fact, when I let go of it, it popped me back to that other window. And look, it doesn't get an icon down there. So there are some integration problems. I'm going to close out of this and try the one of the tricks for releasing the command line. I think it's maybe run. We'll run. I get my different operating systems confused. No, it didn't like run. Is it X-Eyes space ampersand? Yeah, it's X-Eyes space ampersand. That's what releases the terminal so that I can do this, and then I could do, say, Xcalc. I think they're both running. I can minimize the terminal. And there's Xcalc and googly eyes at the same time. And I might still have Nautilus running. I might have closed it. Oh, they are getting their own icons. That belongs to them, and this belongs to the terminal. Oh, that didn't free it up, see? For some reason, Xcalc space ampersand didn't free up the terminal the same way it did for X-Eyes. So I'll Control-C out of that, and then I'll show you Nautilus, Nautilus. I'm really poor with spelling. And there's the file manager for Linux. So yeah, again, we do have graphics. Oh, I thought I closed out of Xcalculator. Maybe the ampersand worked after all to break off the task from the command line so that Control-C'ing it didn't end the task. But this is Windows Linux graphics integration. I could try installing Chromium and show you that, but you know, this is it. This gets the point across. And I didn't have to do a WSL space -- upgrade. That's the key thing. I do believe there are two versions of WSL. One that doesn't have the graphics, one that does. There's also a difference in like running context with hypervisor and stuff. But the fact that WSL2, the default one installed with this beta, is working with graphics means that probably just a non-Microsoft Insider program, Windows 11, normal Windows 11, Windows 11 without the Insider program will probably get you all this. That's one thing I have to test. I mean, it's coming up on 2 a.m. for me, so I'm probably not going to test it tonight. But so I had one big failure. There's no left-right cool screen transitions, but I had one big success. I'm going to be able to get rid of my XVSRC, you know, my free and open source X Windows server that I run to get this capability on Windows 10 if I upgrade to Windows 11. So let's see. Oh, a few things. Oh, Bob, oh my God, two of my favorite commenters are online. I'm still on 10. How much hard disk space and memory does WSL eat up? 8 gigabytes, just right out of the gate. Expect 8 gigabytes, and that's mostly for Ubuntu. The system stuff is already on there. Got WSL on your machine. It's just a command line command and some support stuff. So that's maybe a few hundred megabytes. It's not insignificant, but hard drive is Ubuntu, and you're going to want an 8 gigabyte Ubuntu. I think that's closest to the default, and it can get really big. It can eat into your machine. That's one of the downsides. Closing by, oh, an asteroid. Not the moon, but it might be the asteroid. Oh, the fact that, the fact I got both of you online. And ampersand runs the process in the background. Thank you. A little bit of experimenting, and I figured that out. I crisscross systems all the time. Is WSL more efficient than Cygwin? I don't know. I'm a big fan of Cygwin. My gut is to say that Cygwin is better in almost every way, including the automatic free and open software repository. WSL doesn't have, it gives you access to the Ubuntu one, which is good. That's great. Efficiency, I don't know. Most of the efficiency that got put into it was so that the Linux kernel could run side by side with the Windows kernel. Linux and Windows kernels, the low-level stuff, are side by side as equal, under whatever management, whatever they have running the management. And that counts for a lot in modern advanced stuff, especially the direction they're going with graphics. Cygwin, I never really read or heard much about the fact that it modified things deeply at that deep level. It just kind of made your computer POSIX compliant. And you can do that kind of by a new command line shell, right? You make a new shell, and then you put the GNU type commands. In Cygwin, it's more Unix-like, but you put the Unix commands into just a traditionally created shell, and you make sure you can execute, whatever they are, the Unix exe files. And I imagine that's more lightweight. I imagine the stuff Microsoft is doing steps all over every part of the operating system to do this, much more tightly integrated. Okay, I've accomplished my goal here. I love that I'm leaving up these images in that little streaming window. Let me see if there's anything else I can. I'm not going to log off quick, don't worry, with the two of you here. I'm going to give you plenty of time to ask your questions, but I'm going to gather my own observations. I have 3 things running, and I have 3 little penguins, right? So that's first thing that comes to mind. Second thing that comes to mind is soft edge drop shadows. There's that integration I'm talking about. So I say that Windows is going to do something like what Mac did with Cocoa, with the Cocoa graphics, user interface over top a Mach-based FreeBSD-like Unix. This is different. To have Linux apps running like this with soft edge drop shadows, it's already happened. The second shoe has already dropped. This is tight integration in a way that whatever is different between Windows 11 and Windows 10 is not window dressing. In fact, window dressing is a pretty core concept here, because holes are being punched through to a common display space from 2 different kernels. That's it. That's the re-architecture of Windows right there. You see what Microsoft's strategy is. This is so much less Windows than it ever used to be, because what if the only apps you were ever running were Linux apps? The role of Windows in this case has been what? To get your system booted? No, it's more low-level stuff. The thing that shares the 2 kernels has done that. So window dressing stuff, this stuff around here belongs to Windows. The icons at the top, the icons at the bottom. But this hole punching and sharing of rectangular regions, it'll be in rectangles. It'll just be probably alpha transparency tricks. Other insights are that arrow snap is not there. Which is really a disappointment for Nautilus, because could you imagine you arrow snap Nautilus over to the left, and then you arrow snap Windows Explorer over to the right? Now that's integration. That would be cool. See, it doesn't even give a choice. It says, here are your other options. And none of those are these. So that's insightful. That's important to notice. Another thing important to notice, well, I'll take a look at questions, but I was going to say a double click, a left double click does nothing, and a right click does bring up menu options. That's cool. Very Mac looking menu options. Look at that. Okay, let's see if you guys are saying stuff. No, not yet, but boy, look at all those people. I must be onto a topic. Graphics subsystem for the Linux subsystem for Windows. On, what am I on? You guys need to see my settings stuff. So WinVer. I wish I could make that bigger. I can probably use the accessibility stuff to make it bigger, but I'm on version 22H2, OS build 22621.1, 22.1, and that is currently the Insider Track beta, the middle of the road, not the release candidate, not the developer track, right in the middle. So far, I'm seeing nothing that is all the promised WSL stuff should be the stuff that hit the Windows 11 release, which could be reason enough for me to switch to Windows 11 laptop. This is real tempting now, except I just turn off XVSRC and I use the occasional Nautilus thing. You know, the initial excitement is going to wear off once I'm like, oh, I got the Wayland stuff to work. I'm going to be like, yeah, I don't need that much like that. Chrome automation, right? If I were to run my scripts. Oh, one of the great disappointments right now of Windows is that in the store, in the Microsoft store, there is not Jupyter Lab. If you can apt install Jupyter Lab and keep Jupyter Lab updated with apt, updates, apt upgrades without reinstalling all the time, because the uninstall and reinstall of Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab under Windows is off. But for many, many years, there was Cygwin, and Cygwin turns your machine into as good of a Unix machine as the Unix standards people expect. So there's Cygwin, and then there's the often mentioned POSIX compliance organization or whatever, for a portable operating system interface, right? That's what Unix is. Unix is probably more appropriately named POSIX because the whole point is to be a portable operating system, easily rewritten using virtual machine techniques that started with BCPL and became LLVM and the GCC compiler. Lots of sub-stories here. But the methodology of making Unix makes it portable. So this portable operating system constitutes a Unix, even though there's better standards out there these days. And Cygwin abides by it. The Macintosh does not with its Unix. Everything Debian derivative, including Ubuntu, does not, because it calls for the Red Hat Package Manager system, not Debian Package Manager. So not that is the be-all end-all, but when you installed Cygwin on your Windows laptop, you had a Unix system, a very formal, acceptable one. Now, a lot of people thought it was too heavyweight. A lot of people thought it nuked your machine too much. By today's standards, it's like you don't even notice. But for those people that it bothered, there was always MinGW, MinGW 64 in particular, because, lightweight, but taking advantage of modern architecture is good too. And that put just enough Cygwin on your machine that you could do the compiler toolchain. You could compile and make Unix-like software on your Windows machine. Minimalist GNU for Windows. So for people who didn't like the heavy weightness, and that was good. That was good. I experimented around with that. I've had needs for that in the past. And the biggest thing I came away with that from is Minty. The fact that of all the terminals out there before Microsoft came along with their Windows terminal, the best in the free and open source world was Minty, which was part of the whole Sigwin, MinGW. You know, it all comes from the same people. Effort, the TTY program. And then the sub-story there, and then I'll get back to the questions, is that TT is remote teletyping, right? It's just a protocol that existed almost before computers so that people could type to each other around the world. And those were cheap, available machines, teletypewriters, right? So all the time-sharing stuff where the computer was elsewhere, they rigged these TTY machines to be able to connect to those more powerful remote computers. And that's where this whole, tradition of Minty and, the TTYs as part of your terminal software comes from. And the weirdness about them. A lot of their signature, 80 columns across, 20 characters up and down. All this stuff is inherited from back in these worlds. VT100 terminal emulators, that kind of stuff. The chat is still in here. Yeah, I read your mind. Yeah. So, I stopped messing with it. MinGW isn't worth it because just go with Sigwin. Sigwin, you're on a $200 laptop, so I understand. I get it. You're keeping stuff efficient. You might be a perfect candidate for MinGW. I don't think it's going to be a viable future. I think it's going to get more niche and more niche. But on hardware like yours, you might have to stay niche, right? When I say $800 is cheap, part of that statement is I'm going to be able to run WSL. I don't know if you can on that hardware. Oh my goodness, Chronicles is here too. Hi, Desktop Chronicles. Hi, Celtic Orthodox Prayer. And Bob O. Yeah, all my favorite commenters on the videos. So yeah, I'll stay on. I'm not going anywhere. I don't care. It's 2 a.m. This is exciting. I almost didn't do this, by the way. I was very disheartened. I was like, had a difficult day. I'm dealing with my move. I'm trying to get my apartment so that I have overlap without spending too much, and really took a lot of focus and time and energy. And so I'm like, I'm sitting here not knowing whether this left-right effect works and not knowing whether I have Linux graphics software. So let me just go on and do this. And my first streaming attempt failed miserably. Something I did stopped it, or maybe it was just my broadband. And I'm like, you know what? I have these sitting open here. The video can be that much quicker getting to the point because I know I take a long time to get to the point. So let me just start and see what happens. So I'm going to break out that chat and make it mostly about talking to you guys. So expectations, you got to have questions. Not that I'll have answers. I'll give answers. They might not be the right answers. But I'll Google it. If it's not the right answer, I will fact check. That is my assurance to you. I'm also going to get rid of some stuff because I am not pleased with this performance. Your $200 laptop, their prayer, is probably higher performance than mine is right now. Okay, get rid of all tabs. These things couldn't be doing good for performance, but they're cool. I'm going to keep them running. I don't need my notes anymore from Notepad. Don't save. Oh, Wayland. Maybe I should say something about Wayland. X Windows versus Wayland is an interesting issue. That's all it is. It's like X Windows is not going to have the number of instructions to draw a screen that the fancy instructions that are built into these modern GPUs have. So as low performance as this is, it doesn't matter. They have NVIDIA. They have NVIDIA talking to the Linux side. Do you know what that means, folks? That means all your machine learning libraries are going to work Linux side. They're always newer. It's where all the action is first. It doesn't matter whether you're a TensorFlow person or a PyTorch person, the two main, learning libraries. That's not the models. You can use different models on top of those engines, and then you can use different APIs on top of the models, on top of the engines. It's a pyramid with things like the graphics cards at the bottom. I should really do graphics and stuff. Maybe I'll do, I don't have Art Rage. I'm tempted to do Art Rage. But at the bottom, you have your GPUs, your hardware. And then over top of that, you have, your operating system. And then over top of that, you've got your machine learning libraries like PyTorch or Tensor. And over top of that, you got your learning models. And over top of that, you got some sort of API like fast.ai, and there's some other ones out there, but, to make it for humans. And this stuff has not been very available to me because you need that. It's a catch-22 to do this stuff. And maybe it's just in my mind. To do this stuff, you need access to this stuff. To have access to this stuff, it was usually just, your main OS, Windows. Windows had access to that. But the Linux type stuff didn't. But now action has just been made here so that your Linux can be your OS here. And so machine learning is just much more achievable now on my everyday hardware. Let's find that chat. Oh, it's spiking. There's interest here. Showing that has got to be a pretty big draw on the machine. Another silly question. Could PowerShell 7 replace Bash? It's the shell game. It literally is the shell game. I mean, the only reason I don't use PowerShell is because it's not really the Linux command set. There's a lot having to do with muscle memory. The GNU command set, the Unix command set, when you learn how to echo and you learn how to pipe, you can be a programmer without being a programmer. It's another big point of Unix. Unix originally, one of the various reasons it became popular is because of the way you could connect the output of one program into the input of the other. And even within Unix and Linux, there's already a schism between shells. Bash, which you mentioned, and Corn Shell. Corn Shell is actually more powerful, made even more for developers. But the echo command that everyone gets used to using on Bash is print under Corn Shell. So there's already this dichotomy, this muscle memory, this pulling back and forth between two shell environments, different loyalties. It's not as big of a split as between text editors, VI and Emacs, but it's a split for sure. And so that you have PowerShell coming in from Microsoft, which is not really Unix or Linux command sets, but it's just enough to make DevOps people and sysadmins and netadmins yield to say, Uncle, I prefer having my job and working on your Microsoft equipment than a sense of purity and continuing to insist on being a Unix and Linux person and not being able to work for you. That's why PowerShell exists. So replacing Bash? Probably not. The purists who are like Unix and Linux and now really exist on mainstream platforms, give me the most canonical version possible, which honestly is Red Hat, CentOS, that whole lineage. And it took the power of Microsoft to even allow that to be something other than mainstream POSIX compliant Unix/Linux. Instead, it's Debian, which, as I pointed out, is not really POSIX compliant, but it took the power of Microsoft partnering with a company that named itself Canonical. Reality falls in line with the fiction because Microsoft is infinitely resourced. So why hasn't that infinitely resourcedness allowed Shell to become the new Unix? You can't pull the wool over everyone's eyes. Oh, Docker. Am I planning to use Docker? And what are my thoughts on dependency management, VENV versus Docker? Also, have I checked Git Bash for WSL? Seems to work very well. I'll start with the last one. I don't know anything about Git Bash, but I will look into it. I'll make a note right now. Git-bash. Okay, sounds like something I should know about. The other ones I have opinions on. What do I feel about Docker? If you're pulling down an image to use it, the way people used to talk about net appliances, Docker is very nice. If you're a developer, I wouldn't touch it with a 100-foot pole. I tried. This compositing stuff, this base image, I'm familiar with the concept, the involatile base image. Take a look at my version of Linux called Levinix. The base image of Levinix is the RAM init FS. It's 500K, not even a megabyte of code or something like that, that just loads in RAM and runs, and there's no way to overwrite it. There's no changing it. And anything else that happens is like a patch applied to it that composites over it. That's how Docker works. A lot of people like this, but it is so contrary to muscle memory and your everyday way of working that if you're a developer, well, proof's in the pudding. The Linux organization, the people who put out official Linux, did not use Docker's model. They just didn't use it. They used something called LXC and LXD. LXC is for Linux containers, and LXD is for the daemon that runs the Linux container. So what's the difference between LXCs under LXD versus Docker? The model doesn't change of Linux. There's no compositing. There's nonsense. It's just a persistent Linux machine. It's sharing it's using the same basic tricks of chroot that's always been around. None of this stuff is new. People who knew how to use the chroot command could get quite a bit of the advantage of today's containers. They just had to be hardcore. So the keep it on the main line, keep it familiar thought process won on Linux. Docker won in the public mind. And there's nothing wrong with Docker, except if you're a developer not wanting time. It's one more thing to relearn and retrain that, frankly, will probably change in 2 to 5 years. But LXD is not going to change in 2 to 5 years because it's the same thing as it's been for the past 20 years. So that's my LXD. Go with LXD if you're like me and you just want throwaway machines that don't risk foobarring. I think I saw you use my beloved word foobar. If you want to avoid foobar, you want Linux containers under the Linux daemon manager. If you want to release images into the wild for people to use as like NetApps, then Docker is good. It's sort of won in that space. And my thoughts on dependency management. Okay, VENV versus Docker. Well, it's very similar. And the question is, what are you trying to reduce the risk of? If you're trying to reduce the risk of nuking your whole system, then you want you want LXD. You say VENV versus Docker. Let me replace that with VENV versus LXD. If you're trying to nuke your whole Linux system, you want LXD. If you to prevent nuking your whole Python with the wrong pip installs, conflicting dependencies, then you want VENV or virtual ENV. I've been trying to get to VENV because it ships with Python. It's the built-in. Standard library stuff is always best. But for some reason or another, I can't get away from pip installing virtual ENV. I don't know if it's just that all the documentation out there is still geared around virtual ENV, but if you need to containerize your Python environment, VENV or virtual ENV, whichever you can make work. And if you're trying to containerize your whole system because of apt installs, right? Apt installs versus pip installs. If your pip installs might go wrong, virtual env. If your apt installs might go wrong, then it's LXD. Will I sell you my Barry Altman Commodore 64 Linux computer? Never. Yeah, just kidding, but maybe not. I feel the same way about it. I don't have a great motherboard in there yet, but oh my God, it's one of my few prized possessions. Matter shouldn't matter. Matter doesn't matter. Matter is all. I threw out my original Amiga 1000, and you know how much I love the Amiga 1000 or the Amiga line, but I kept the top that had the signatures because I'm realistically never going to breathe life into that hardware. I'm not keep a personal hardware museum guy. I'm always moving. I'm always living somewhere different. But that one piece that has the signature and Jay Miner's paw print of, of Mitchie, his dog, is precious to me. As is my Commodore 64X from Barry Altman, because before he passed, rest his soul, I used to talk with him. We used to, talk and laugh about how different it could have been with Commodore and how he had the largest installation, the largest known installation of Commodore 64s in the world, running channels, cable TV channels. And so, a real someone who you hit it off with. And so this coming from him in the first place is a miracle. The fact this thing hit market is a miracle. And the second thing is that he did it in such a way that this mini, I forget the name, but mini ATX standard motherboard is in. I'm going to be running this when it's virtual reality time with my Commodore 64 looking modern PC or, hollow engine metaverse thing inside of there. I think it's great with the cherry. I forget if it's cherry blue or cherry brown. He might have gone with the cherry brown switches to make them a little less clicky, but some matters. I'm holding on to that thing.